a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 do.
Good afternoon and welcome to Spirit Cafe. I'm Barbara Schreiner Trudell, and my co-host Cheryl Rogers is on vacation. So she'll be back soon. And in the meantime, we have C from Ottawa who is co-hosting, and today she is going to interview me. But let us begin first with the land acknowledgement, and then we'll get straight into the show. So we work, live, and play on the historical and traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. And as we gather from many places on Turtle Island, we as settlers are grateful for the opportunity to meet here. And we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. All Indigenous people, Métis, Inuit included. And though I'm not a person of African descent, I'm committed to continually acting in support of and in solidarity with Black communities seeking freedom and reparative justice in light of the history and ongoing legacy of slavery that continues to impact Black communities all across Canada and the US, and I'm sure other parts of the world. As part of this commitment, I would also like to acknowledge that not all people came to these lands as migrants and settlers. Specifically, I wish to acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily and through the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. And in support of our ongoing efforts to confront anti-Black racism, we pay tribute to these ancestors of African origin and descent. We also acknowledge the contributions made both in shaping and strengthening our community, our country, our world. And by making this acknowledgement, we strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. We recognize our oneness, we realize our history, and we choose to create a new reality. We are one. All right, and now my beloved co-host here. Hi, C.
Hello, how are you?
I am good. I'm good. I'm on the hot seat today. I like it.
You are. I hope it's not too hot for you. I'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it cool.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
I'm excited to be interviewing you, the marvelous Reverend Barbara Schreiner Trudell. I have heard about you long before I met you, and great things. And so when I had this opportunity, I said, I'm going to ask her if I can interview her because I want to know more. And I think a lot of people would really enjoy knowing more about you and benefit from your wisdom and your experiences in this world.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So you all set?
I'm set.
Okay. So I find that interviewing is easier than, say, if I had said to you, well, why don't you just tell us about yourself for the next hour?
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
yeah, it's just a lot easier. Oh, we got someone from Geneva here. That's wonderful. Hello.
Yeah,
Hello, Fiona.
Hi,
So,
Fiona.
Reverend Barbara, before you were Reverend Barbara, what would people call you? What was your name? And talk to me about that time of your life.
Well, when I was a little girl, it was Barbie. And
Oh,
then as I got a little bit bigger, I was like, okay, you can't call me that anymore. And it became Barb. And so I was Barb right up until over halfway through my ministerial training. And one day I sat back and said, yeah, no. And what was interesting was I let people cut my name short because there was a part of me that thought, well, it's a lot of work for people to say Barbara. It was such a low self-esteem. self-esteem thing. And so when I decided that, no, my name is Barbara and that's my name, it's been interesting because now I'm comfortable correcting people. If they use Barb, I'll sit back and say, well, my preference is Barbara. Um, and yet people call me Rev B, and I'm absolutely okay with that. So
Okay.
it's, just sort of owning my identity. That took me a minute because my life was challenged, shall we say, up until up until it wasn't.
Okay.
It sometimes takes a minute for us to find our rhythm and our real path, right? So for me, it was. I had a difficult childhood, um, challenges with my mom especially, and then my parents divorced, and at that time, people didn't do that. Divorce wasn't something people did, so I
Yeah.
was humiliated by then,
Mm,
and I was 11 years old. So that
that's
changed the
tough.
trajectory of things. Up to then, I was like, "How can I fit in and not ruffle, any feathers?" And then as soon as that happened, I became just this angry, hateful, frustrated person who lived life really in a state of battle for quite a few
Right.
years after that. Yeah.
Oh dear. And you were the oldest child, weren't you, in your family?
Yes. Yes, I'm the eldest.
So it affected you in a unique way.
Yeah, and from my mom and dad, there were 4 children, of which I was the eldest. I am the eldest. And then, when my mom left my dad, she remarried and had 3 more children, and he had
Wow.
3 children from a previous marriage. So now we're 10.
Oh
And,
boy.
yeah. Now, not all 10 of us lived under the roof all at the same time because his kids lived with their mom, but they would come on weekends and things like that. So there was a lot of time when we were quite a big, unruly group, to say the least. But there's great fun in that,
Yeah.
having lots of siblings, lots of annoyance and lots of fun as well. So
Right.
I have fond memories and then some that are not so
Wow.
fond.
I just want to say hi to Christopher and Mary Ellen who stepped in. Thanks for joining us. And okay, so where were you living at the time when your parents divorced? Where were you raised and born?
Born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, and, I lived in Calgary for my first 42 years.
Wow.
That was my place. My family, like, siblings and stuff, they all still live there. 2 of my children live there, 1 lives in Nova Scotia, and then 1 here with me. So,
Okay.
yeah, my family's still there, so Calgary's sort of the home base.
So do you go back often or
Yes,
yeah?
I don't get sunny vacations down in the Caribbean or in Hawaii, and I don't get to go visit Fiona in Geneva. I go to Calgary. I
Well,
go to Calgary to
it
visit
is.
my
It's a
kids.
beautiful province, Alberta, and I guess it's just a matter of which season you choose to go back.
Well, I usually go in the summertime, but it's just that, when you're visiting family and stuff like that, you're kind of in a hurry. It's not really a vacation. So there's times when I would rather have a real, laying on a beach type vacation, but,
Right.
I've got my kids and my grandkids and I really want to spend time with them. So that's a really important piece. Mhm.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about Barbara Schreiner? Like
Barbara
we've heard about the divorce, but what happened after that?
It was interesting. My teenage years were a real struggle. There was just a lot of pain, and because I was so angry with my parents, we teach law of attraction. You bring into your life exactly who you are, and I really had a hard go of things. At age 12, I was attacked by 3 boys and sexually assaulted. At age 14, I was raped by an older boy who drugged me, and
Oh,
then
gosh.
from 14 to 15, I was experimenting with different drugs, trying to, I think, self-medicate, I was suicidal. I, really didn't want to be alive. There was so much that was just so hard. And then I met my first husband. I was 15 and, fell in love with this guy. And we ended up uh, getting me pregnant. So that was, not my highest moment. But I'll tell you, I got to say, I'm really grateful for my daughter, my eldest daughter. She's just an absolute gift in my life. And it was tough. I thought for sure my parents were going to kill me. They obviously did not, and
Mhm.
there was a lot of anxiety around that. I ended up marrying him when I was 16. We got married just about 2 weeks before she was born, and we were together for 2 years. But it was a really tumultuous relationship. He was quite violent, and I was very angry. So it was, a very difficult match. And we split. We split when I was 18, and yeah, it was a tough time, and I continued to make life hard for quite a while after that still. So the
Okay.
teenage years were rough, but what I am grateful for with him is when I started dating him, he was somebody who didn't believe in using drugs.
Okay.
So I no longer used anything, which was really, really great. And, so because I'd been doing acid and MDA, things like that. And it was like stopping that. Fortunately, I stopped that before I ever got pregnant. And
Mm,
so
yeah.
that was sort of the real plus of my relationship with him, that and my daughter. So it's, sometimes you have terrible things happen to you, but there's something to be grateful for in all of it. So that's what I was most grateful for there is I stopped doing
Yeah.
these
Thank goodness
these
for that.
horrible things. Yeah.
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 So I understand that you worked in Calgary for a while before you moved out. Can you talk a little bit about where you were working, even though you had a young child? How did you manage, and where were you?
I was when I was working in a drugstore, stocking shelves and running cash and earning, I don't know, about $2 an hour, I think back then. It was it was kind of tough. Got a bit of money from my ex-husband as well. And so that difficult time, like trying to figure out how to pay the bills and do what needed to be done. I ended up for a while there where I just couldn't manage it anymore, and because he had a very stable job, plus he lived at home with his mom, I actually, gave him custody of our daughter so that she would have, you know, a proper home to live in and that sort of thing, and that was a really difficult, decision to do that, but I really felt like that was the best thing I could do for her.
Yeah, it's courageous.
Um It was
Tough but
it was
courageous.
very painful. I felt like an absolute failure. I still don't like talking about it, but her and I have talked about it a lot. And what I didn't know, and so, this is where, guilt can sort of fit in, but we're past it now. But it was, he would beat me. It never occurred to me he would be abusive to our child.
Ah,
And I found
wow.
out when she was 18 that, he'd been pretty rough with her as well, but she never told
Mm,
me anything. I had no idea until she was 18 is when she spoke up. So that for me was because I thought she's living with her grandma, this will be good for her. So that was a really difficult, time for me, and also a time where I felt like a real failure. That I had, neglected my child, even though in my mind I thought I was doing the right thing. It just didn't feel that way after the fact. Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to know other people's expressions of their emotions, isn't it? We just
It is.
can't know. The
Yeah.
nicest people behind the scenes can be doing something we don't understand that we wouldn't
Well, of
want.
course, yeah, and I was raised in a time where what happens in the house stays in the house, you know? So, it's like you didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about the fact that, you were being abused, or even, my mom and dad, I would hear them fight and stuff, and I don't know if he ever hit her or not, but I know that there was a lot of yelling and fighting going on. So that sort of was there. And then I managed to attract that into my life as well. Uh, you
Right.
know, you learn over time eventually.
Right. And you say attract, right? As a spiritual teacher, you know what that means. And we'll get to that because your
Yeah.
life changed. So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit into your 20s before your before your epiphany. Talk to me a little bit about the next stages. What were you thinking and what were your goals?
Okay. My goal was to just get through another day. I started working for the Calgary Herald, and I met my second husband. We met in a bar, and just great way to get started. But he ended up being one of my best friends in the entire world. Even after
Okay.
we divorced, we created a beautiful, beautiful friendship and relationship together for as long as he lived. So the time, you know, I left working in the drugstore. I got a job at the Calgary Herald. I worked in their advertising department, and I was with the Calgary Herald for 10 years.
Wow.
And while I was there, I did a couple of different jobs, administrative type. In the beginning, I was driving a car and taking proofs around to advertisers to get them to approve them and things like that. So, and then eventually we launched a weekly newspaper called Neighbors. And in that weekly paper, myself and Kathleen O'Halloran were the two people who created that, and it became very successful. We had $1
Hmm.
million in increased revenue in the first year and numerous new clients. So it really was a big success. And I was awarded, Kathleen and I both were awarded the President's Award for Southam for our contribution to the company.
That's
So
amazing.
that, yeah,
Congratulations.
so that was a real highlight. But during that time, while I was working for the Herald, I was, cheating on my husband because I got married again. I ended up cheating on him. I was angry all the time. He wasn't living up to my expectations, wasn't meeting my needs. We had two children together, two boys, and my boys are remarkable people. And it was really hard. Like I was a terrible wife, and he wasn't perfect either. Like he was not really available. He liked to gamble. He was never abusive to me. I think he loved me from the time he met me until he passed away. So that
Mhm.
that part was never really in question. But for me, I was struggling. I didn't like me. I didn't like my life. I didn't like anything that was going on. I was cranky and miserable all the time. And when I had the spiritual epiphany, I was 27 years old, and at that point, I actually had moved out of my house, so he was at home with the kids, and I moved out because I wasn't particularly enjoying being married, and I stayed with a girlfriend for, about a month and a half or something. And while I was there, his mom called me one night or one day and said, "Would you come to church with me tomorrow night?" And I was not raised with religion. I never went to church. I could count on one hand probably the number of times I'd been in a church up to that point. And so I said, "Yeah, yeah, I'll go," because I really wanted her to like me, right? That was my underlying thing. Maybe if I tolerate an hour of church, she'll like me more. So I went to church that night, and I don't know how to describe what occurred other than to say when I walked in, I was in complete darkness, and when I came out, the lights had been turned on. It's like I had this profound epiphany moment where I knew God as love,
Wow.
and I knew that it was right here where I am. It wasn't separate, it wasn't out there somewhere. It was right here, and it was love, and it was beautiful, and it was warm, and it changed everything instantly. Instantly, everything changed. And that moment was so profound for me. I knew that I was called to ministry. In that moment, I knew that's what I was going to do, but I was in this Nazarene church. and they didn't allow women to do things like be ministers.
Okay.
And so I thought, well, maybe I'll have to be, a missionary somewhere, and whatever. I just knew the call was there. So I started at that point to really change so many things about myself. I ended up, my husband left me about 5 months later because he didn't marry a religious person. So he was like, and he went to a stag one Friday night, and then he phoned me Sunday afternoon to say, I guess you figured out I'm not coming home. And it
Wow.
was, so for a year I hated him. I was so angry with him, but got over that. About a month after he left, or a month and a half after he left, I was really struggling. My kids were angry and frustrated because dad wasn't there, and there was just a lot of pain, and I was tired. I didn't know what to do, and I planned my suicide. I decided that enough was enough, and I just didn't have the strength to do it anymore. And I had been, from the time I had the spiritual epiphany, I kept going to that church, and
Mhm.
I went to their prayer meetings, I went to their games nights, I went to their Sunday morning service, Sunday evening service. Man, I couldn't get enough. I was trying to learn
Yeah.
about spirituality. And so I was still going to that church all the time, but I got somebody to look after my kids, probably my sister, and decided that I was going to take my life. And as I was getting ready to leave the house, the phone rang. And so I pick it up, and there's a woman on the phone who, she says, You don't know me, but I sit 3 rows behind you at church, and you've been on my mind.
Wow.
And I said, Well, I'm just in the middle of something. I've got to get going. She goes, Yeah, I know I'm interrupting you, but I don't know why, but I just have to talk to you.
Mm.
And I don't know what it's about, but I can't get you out of my mind, and I can't hang up. And so that went on for a few minutes. And finally, when I couldn't get her off the phone, I burst into tears and told her what my plan had been.
Wow. It's
And it
incredible.
was that interrupt, a stranger phoning me at that particular moment, who was very persistent about not getting off the call.
Wise
Um,
woman.
yeah. And for me, it was like when it landed, I thought, oh my God, it's like, it's not your time. This is not what you're meant to be doing. And so I just took a breath and talked to her about what I was feeling, what was going on for me, and got over it and decided, well, I guess there's something worth living for. If a stranger's going to reach out like that, that's got to say something. So I stopped right there. I stayed in that church for another year,
Okay.
and then I had to leave because they kept saying, we're the only ones going to heaven and everybody else is going to hell. And I would ask questions. Well, what about the rabbi? Well, no, he's going to hell because he doesn't accept Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. And I went, man, that doesn't feel right to me,
Yeah.
because that wasn't the experience I had. So I left there after a year and a half, and then I found CSL.
Wow. That is quite a journey there. And, what do you call that? You call that what, grace, when grace just finds you and comes through you to
Yeah,
move you through to that next place. You
yeah.
know, a part of you, do you think a part of you at this whole time is inside setting another intention? Like, although you were miserable and you had kids and it was struggling everywhere, but there must be a part of you that had an intention that drew to you this profound journey that took place next.
Yeah, well, I got married again, only this time to an alcoholic who was very violent and hurt me in every imaginable way possible. Because I hadn't yet sort of fell in love with me. I guess that's what I would say, is I was still very insecure. I was still looking to be rescued. And so I found a man who had wealth, who treated me like a princess, until I married him. And then everything went to hell from there. But I think that journey too was really a big part of me moving forward because it allowed me to become very, very clear. What I realized after I left him is I create my reality. I create my life. Nobody else is creating my life for me. I am. And I have the ability to change my thinking and begin to change the direction of my life. And so when I split up with him, and realized that life wasn't working and I didn't want to live this way anymore, I turned around and I had this clear thing in my head where I went, never again. I will never allow another man to abuse me or my children ever again. And that was really strong in my mind that somehow I would create something different. And
Mhm.
so that was, and probably about a year later, I started dating somebody, and he was somebody I'd known for years and years and years. He had been a good friend long before starting to date him. And we went out together for maybe about a month. And I was sitting at his workplace, and he was on the phone, and another coworker came in and was chatting with me. And when he got off the phone, we got out the car, we were gonna go have lunch or whatever, and he starts screaming and yelling at me. How dare I talk in his office while he's on the phone and blah, blah. And I just turned and looked at him. I said, "Drive me home." And when we got to my house, I said, "Don't ever call me. Don't ever stop by. We're done." And I got out, and that was the last time that I created any abuse for myself.
Mm,
I
good.
married again because, marriage is what I do, obviously. So I married again, number 4, a couple of years after that. And, we had a pretty good connection. But one day I came home, and he had my son, my eldest son. He was holding it, pinning him down and yelling at him. And I'm like, okay, we're done. Nobody gets
Yep.
to hurt my
No
kids.
extra chances. Yep.
Yeah, like that was that. So at that point, I was in my training as a practitioner. I've been doing a lot of work. I was getting more clear about who I am, um, starting to even maybe like myself a little bit, and enjoying the journey that I was on. I was loving my studies and the work that I was doing. The journey to here, because when I started taking science mind classes, I knew that I was going to be a minister day one. And I said to my teacher, I said, I'm going to be a minister. And she's like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Because I think she'd heard that from lots of people.
Yep.
uh, and I said no. And she said, well, you'll have to start a center then, because nobody's going to hire you right out of school. I said, fine, I'll start one in Toronto, because there was nothing here. And that vision of Toronto never left. And when I graduated in 1998, it still wasn't, the momentum to get here to Toronto wasn't there. And so I'm like, I I don't know what's going on. And then the Vernon Church, the Vernon Center became available. It had been available for a while. And so I decided to apply there, and they hired me. I worked there as senior minister for a year and a half. And so it was the perfect segue from, my Herald days, and then I went into real estate, and then into ministry, because that's a natural progression, real estate to ministry. But in ministry, it was that time there prepared me to start a center here, because I had a better understanding of, you go to school and you learn a bunch of stuff, but you don't
Yep.
learn what it means to actually run a church. You have no
Right.
idea about that. So that became clear in the year and a half I was in Vernon, and then moved to Toronto and started CSL Toronto. And that I served there for 11 years. And it
Wow.
was, it had its ups and downs. It's, moments of, great joy and excitement, and moments of great difficulty and challenge, like most things. But through the process of all of this, and even leaving that center, I've been finding myself and coming to a place of, thank you, Fiona. You're so sweet. But coming to that place of going, if I'm the creator of my life, if I am one with this universe, if there is within me this infinite potential, then what if I began today to live that? Like to stop with the limitation, to start listening very clearly to the that still small voice and begin to change the trajectory of my life. Like, am I ready to do that? So I think the journey's been an exciting one. Shortly after moving here, I met my husband, number 5, lucky number 5. We've been together now 21 years. So I finally got one to stick, but it's time for us to take a commercial break.
Okay.
Time's been flying
Gone
here.
fast.
Anyway, this is the Spirit Cafe with me and C, and don't go away. We're going to be back in just a minute or two.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Well, you're watching Spirit Cafe, and I'm the one in the hot seat today.
Oh, yeah.
Is interviewing me.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind. I just want to take you back for 1 second to when did you find, I guess it was CSL you found first, right?
Yeah.
And how did you find it, and how did that door open for you?
I actually, right around the time that I had this spiritual epiphany, I also had a, a job review with my employer. And I'd been there for many years. And the job review I got this particular time was not very good. And he just told me either my attitude changes or I'm fired, was basically what I got told. And so that started me on the path of looking for, sort of self-help things, different workshops and things like that to help me to come to terms with some of these things. And one of the workshops that I attended, the gentleman who ran it, when I decided to leave this Nazarene church, telling him, the message isn't landing for me. He mentioned, at the time it was called the Center for Positive Living. And so I thought, well, I'll go check it out. And when I walked in the door the very first time, I thought, oh my God, it was just like this bubble of love. I felt so good there, and it felt like home. And it felt like what I'd experienced when I had that moment, that epiphany moment, that's what it felt like to walk into the center. And so that became the place where I wanted to be. And when I got into that marriage number 3, he was very quick to keep us away from there because he saw that it was having a positive impact. And I think that struck him as probably not a good thing for him to control and manipulate me. So that it was after he and I split up that I actually went back and immediately started doing classes and stuff. It became my home and my focus. All of my reading, everything I did sort of focused around that. So that that journey of kind of learning how to like myself and love myself, and to let go of the pain that I'd caused others, as well as the pain I'd caused for myself, and the pain I caused for my children, which, I've
Right.
sat down and talked to each one of them about, the mistakes that I made, because I wanted to not pretend like, oh, I'm this holy whatever, but rather I'm a human being, and I've walked a path that allows me to have great empathy for people, because I've probably done it, most of it. So anything you tell me isn't going to shock me, for sure. So being able to sit with my kids and to share with them about the mistakes I've made, the things that I'm proud of, the things that I'm not so proud of, but to just own it all and go, that's part of the journey.
And
That
I love that. And if more parents did that, the kids would just go, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe you're doing this. Thank you." And they would just go right in, and the relationship would change completely. So I'm so grateful you did that. I'm so happy to hear
Yeah,
that.
it's interesting because their friends have always liked hanging out with me too. And I think that's made a big difference as well, having these
Mm.
young people. Like, even last summer, my youngest daughter is 17 and she went to Calgary for the summer. And I get a call from her one afternoon going, my friends want to come over for a sleepover. And I went, you're in Calgary? She goes, no, they want to have a sleepover with you. And I went, what are you talking about? They want to come and hang out with you, and they want to talk about, spirituality and this and that. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay. So I said, let me just sit with it, because it just felt weird that these teenagers were going to come have a sleepover and my kid wasn't home. Um, so I found that, and I was talking to somebody who was mentoring me at the time, and he said, this is fantastic that kids want to come and hang with you, that they want to talk about spirituality. This is a beautiful thing.
That is
So I
amazing.
yeah. So these four kids came over and we sat and we talked about God and spirit and whatever. And we talked for a couple of hours. Then I tried to teach them how to play rummy. That didn't go through with five of us, with only one of us knowing how it's played. And then after, I don't know, a few hours, they said, okay, well, we're going to go to Genevieve's room and go to bed and watch a few movies on the way. And I said, I got to go to sleep. So they went downstairs. I went off to bed. And yeah, and then the next morning they headed off, and they've come around. They come whenever we do in-person services. They come to the services, and they love it. They love the teaching. They love what's going on, and they're like 15, 16, 17 years old. So
Beautiful. What a
yeah,
treasure that is.
yeah, it's just lovely to have young people who are interested and who trust. Like, these kids tell me all manner of stuff, probably stuff they would never tell their parents.
Yeah.
And they I want them to have a place where they can talk, a place where they can share. And so for me, I I love teenagers. They're interesting, they're passionate, they're, sort of flipping between the child and the adult and trying to find their space. And having an adult that they can speak to who's safe is actually a really great thing. So, and my kids have always had that, where their friends could hang out with me and hang out at the house, and it was a safe place. So I've always sort of wanted that for my children, a place where they can hang.
Yeah. Well, I can relate to that. I had a neighbor that I like to go and sit with from time to time and hear her
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Oh, it's awesome. It is. It's awesome.
So so you're in Toronto, you're building CSL in Toronto, and then it's expanding and you're growing, and you've got, I guess you met your husband and you developed, and then you're raising your young kid. And then
Yep, another
what
baby.
happened where you chose to also include the unity movement?
Well, I actually I left I left CSL in 2011 when my father died,
Mhm.
and I just it was a very painful time between me and the board. And with my father dying, I had nothing to give, so I quit. And so for the next couple of months, I didn't do anything. Just kind of hung out at home or whatever, took a break that I needed. And then in September, found that I really missed going to church. And of course, there wasn't another CSL here, and people weren't doing online, so I couldn't just hop on anywhere. So I went to Verity Center for Better Living, which is an offshoot from Unity. So
Okay.
the Universal Foundation for Better Living was founded by the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman when she left Unity and started UFBL. So Verity was a UFBL church. So teaching the same principles, but very much from a Christian perspective and the Unity perspective, right? That Fillmore's. And so I went there. I started there in 2011. I became kind of an associate minister there. I spoke there, on average once a month, taught some classes there, took a bunch of classes there, which was wonderful because it was, he was teaching from the Unity perspective, right? So I was learning, the metaphysical Bible and things that I had not learned in CSL. So it was really a way of expanding my whole experience of spirituality. And then he had been working at a Unity church where he would go and speak for them on Sunday afternoons after his service ended. And that got to be a bit much. And he said, how about you take one a month and I'll take one a month, because he was speaking there twice a month. And I went, yeah, okay. And I did that for a few months. And then they came to me and said, we'd like you to be our minister. So that's when I decided to become trained with Unity. And because CSL and Unity have an agreement, I was able to upgrade fairly quickly. And inside of 2 years, I was ordained as a Unity minister. So
Wow.
I now have a double ordination, the Centers for Spiritual Living and Unity. So I'm ordained in both.
And you find that they meld together well.
Oh, completely. The difference for me is that in CSL, and not all of them, I mean, some of them are very Bible-based. Where I was trained, it was not. And so I'm able to teach the same principles, but to do it from maybe more from an intellectual perspective rather than from a religious perspective. That's how I would see it different. They're both very spiritual. They both do the same thing. And most of the Unity churches that I'm speaking at now on Sundays are not doing the religious thing either. It's like a transition has occurred where we're looking at our spirituality and our connection to the divine and finding ways of dealing with it so that we're not necessarily talking in religious terms. But the two are identical and their foundations are the same. Like the Fillmores and Ernest Holmes went to school together. They studied under Emma Curtis Hopkins and others. So it's like the foundation is the same. And so it's, they just fit. So I'm prayer chaplain for Unity Canada. And
oh, wow. That's right. And I've read your prayers and I love them, by the way. They're really beautiful. They're like healing. They're totally healing prayers. I read them and I get the vibes for the body. I feel changes and it's amazing. Yeah.
Science of mind. We call it spiritual mind treatment rather than prayer. And it's a powerful technique that Ernest Holmes created, and it's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah. And so this is so coming out of Curtis Hopkins and before that we had Emerson and Henri David Thoreau and different teachers, and this whole movement is now classified as kind of like a new thought type of movement. Can you explain that?
Well, I think because everything comes under the umbrella of what we think about, we bring about. I think that's probably where New Thought got coined. It's really not new though. Where this is age-old wisdom. This goes back to before Christianity or whatever. And when we look at all of the world religions, we will find some very common points, like there is only one, right? Everyone teaches that God is one. It's not two. So it always surprises me when I hear of God and the devil, because that would make two. So it's like there's only one thing going on. And I think when we start to look at the fact that what I think about, the way I think, the way I process information actually draws into my life or repels, what we start to see is that it is actually thinking that is moving energy into matter. So the New Thought movement is all about that metaphysical perspective, or even looking at what they teach in quantum physics. There is only energy, and that energy has movement, and how it moves depends on our own receptivity or resistance. That's how things get created. And even in the Bible, it says, in the beginning, the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it's like, so where along the way did we forget that our words have power?
Mhm.
And so that's basically what we teach, is you are responsible for your life, that you are creating the up and the down, the good and the bad of it. And that's good news and bad news. The bad news is you've created your life exactly as it is. The good news is you created your life exactly as it is. And because you created it, you can change it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
That for
And
me was the winner. Yeah.
incredible. And um, it's so natural. It's like an intuitive unfoldment, what you're talking about. It just seems like such a natural flow, because when we're not in that type of understanding, we're really attached to these ideas of being safe and secure in the bosom of some big being who's surrounding us with love and light, rather than exploding open our
Yeah.
own divinity.
Yeah.
We're really, which is what we really need to do to evolve the world. We're all going to kind of need to really understand that everything inside of us is possible to share with in treasured ways.
Well, and that's I guess what I love the most about the New Thought teaching is that there is that idea of oneness with God. That God is not something outside of us that's punishing or going to take us to heaven or hell, or that heaven and hell are states of consciousness. Right? I lived in hell for many years. It was my go-to. And now it's more heavenly, so I'm really grateful for that. But the journey that we're on is when we can take responsibility for our lives, when we can start to get excited about what we do, when we start to see that the way I think about life, whether I'm worried or fearful, or if I'm joyful and excited, all of that is drawing or repelling energy in my life and creating whatever I'm living. So knowing that I have the power within me to begin to see that God is right here. It's being me. It's not even just in me, it is being me. And all of the attributes of God are present right here where I am. And I have the ability to use them. In fact, I am using them, most often in a dysfunctional, disruptive kind of way, but sometimes I get it right. And so if we began to listen to that still small voice, if we began to believe in the fact that there's a power for good and it's within us, that we have the ability to use it, I think that begins to change everything that's going on, and we start to live from a new and very exciting place. And we start to realize, that's the joy of taking responsibility, because there isn't something outside of me keeping me safe. I am safe. I am this divine one, right? And so there's an energy that changes when we start to really own who we really are and begin to live from that place of, I am creating my life. And, we talk about the law of attraction, and, people go, well, I'll say an affirmation. No, you have to be the affirmation. Saying it is great. That's the starting place, I guess. But until we believe it, until we'll be it, it's
Yeah,
going to continue to be disruptive. We're not going to, because the law of attraction is, I will bring into my life exactly what I am, and what I believe myself to be, and what I believe I'm capable of. That's all I can have.
yeah. And you're doing it all really well, from what I can see.
Well, it's getting better. I've been doing this for 25 years.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's getting,
fantastic.
it's
Yeah, a
getting
lot
better.
of us have benefited from your wisdom, from your writing, your teachings. And can you share some more about what you're offering to the world? I mean, there's this talk show, and how many other shows are you on? and all the writing that you do and all of the talk. Every Monday night, you give wonderful presentations to your community, and I've been there. I don't know if you've seen me, but I've been there, and I've enjoyed you immensely. So maybe you could share a bit about what you are doing now to share this knowledge.
Well, there's so much that I'm doing. I do a Monday night service, which is on the New Thought Media Network, as well as through Zoom and on YouTube and Facebook. And I also have another show that's on Friday afternoons here called The Joy Show, which is I interview people or talk about the value of living authentically, right? There's just one you. That's my acronym for joy. And so that show is great fun. I enjoy doing it. It's quite a delight. So that's on this network, Fridays at 3. And then on the first Friday of every month, I do the Good News on this network. The Good News, just taking stories from the headlines here and there that talk about the beauty, the magnificence, and the wonder of humanity and how beautiful things really can be. So that's part of what I do here. I also teach classes that help people to really take these ideas and make them work for them so that they can really understand it and unpack it, because sometimes it can sound like, oh, change your thinking, change your life. That's a little airy-fairy, but it really isn't. And when we come to that place of really relaxing and going, you know what, I am a powerful creative being. This is one of the classes that's coming up, Consciousness and the Creative Process. I think it's important to acknowledge and recognize that we can do this work at a deep level. I also coach people who are struggling. I do coaching for married couples, for individuals trying to get a grasp on how to create something better for themselves. And of course, I do spiritual mind treatment with people all the time. I have a list of people I pray for daily. This is my website, barbarashrinertrudell.ca. And the whole process that I go through day by day is about maintaining my own practice so that I have the strength and the wisdom and the ability to assist others in creating their practice. So the shows that I do, the prayer work that I do, the service that I do, I speak at a variety of centers on Sundays. I do my service on Monday night, and with classes and everything, I keep pretty busy, but I really, really like it. And I've written 5 books. The 6th is a children's book, which hopefully will be published soon. And that book is for small children about age 4 or 5, about the value of our unique nature. There's my books. These are journals, 30 Days of Love, 30 Days to Joy, 30 Days of Gratitude, and 30 Days of Forgiveness. All of them are a daily practice. So there's in the introduction, it explains that, as you take this book, it's not a read cover to cover type book. It's you read the daily message, you read it out loud so you hear it as well as see it, speak it. It allows the words to begin to anchor. Then you do your best to live it through the day. And at the end of the day, you journal, because these are journals, and you journal your experience. So I've had some really positive feedback from people who have done the books. They're doing books, they're not reading books, which is very, very different. But they really give a great message. And I took a couple of little quotes out, like at the forgiveness book. Forgiveness is the way we move forward. Forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened. It's about accepting what happened and choosing to move forward from it. So again, it's, we can look at things in a different way and begin to sort of examine how we think about things and how we'd like to think about them differently. And the journals help because you're doing it every day.
Right.
And that makes a difference.
That's a great offering. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So who, as you keep going on your path, who are your inspirations?
Well, I have a few. The first person who inspired me greatly was the Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith. When I graduated ministry, I thought, how am I going to do this? I'm this radical rebel, wild woman. How am I going to be a minister? And then I saw Michael Beckwith at the conference I was at, and he was just such a wild man on stage. And it was so beautiful to see him just being him. And he was so different from every minister I'd met that was my inspiration moving forward. Since then, I've met a number of people who inspire me. One was the minister at Verity, where I was for 11 years, the Reverend Evan Reed. He, oh my God, I love that man so much. And he was such an inspiration because he was so clear on his path and what his expectations were for himself and what his desire was for the church. He was always just a very fierce, and stronghold on what he believed to be true and possible. And we worked really, really well together. And he inspired me to discover about the Bible. And because he knew the geography, the history of the world. And then you take Bible and you look at it as, allegory. These are stories, and you look at them from that perspective and how you can apply them to your life today. So that was very, very healing for me. Other people that have really been big have been Louise Hay, Marianne Williamson, and then my very, very dear friend, Carolyn Baxter, who was my grade 10 teacher, who ended up becoming a friend of mine. And we became very, very close in the final years of her life. She was my best friend for many, many years, and went on to become best friends to my kids, which was great once I moved away from
That's
Calgary.
wonderful.
So yeah, many great inspirations have brought me to today.
And I'm taking a course from you coming up. And I had never heard about this teacher before, and I'm surprised because I've read hundreds and hundreds of teachers. So if you could tell me a little bit about this teacher and his wisdom.
Well, Thomas Troward is English. He was writing in the 1800s, so this material has been around for a while. And he was a judge in the Punjab area of India and served there for a long time, and then eventually went back to England. Actually, he was born, I believe, in India. What's interesting about his writing is he was writing about life from a perspective of energy. He was more like a scientist in the way that he talked about spirituality, because he didn't talk about God, but he talked about this energy that's forever moving and how the unity becomes expressed individually and stuff. And he put it into a perspective that was very interesting, very intelligent man. And he was a foundation for Ernest Holmes. Now, Ernest Holmes wrote The Science of Mind. He is the founder of CSL. And so in The Science of Mind, which is the main text that we use, he was inspired by Thomas Troward, by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Phineas Parker's Quimby, Emma Curtis Hopkins. All of these people played a role in helping him to come to a place of, here's what my teaching is. And when he read Troward, he had this almost like an epiphany, like, yes, that's what I've been trying to get across. And Troward had a way of articulating it that just caused it to land, so he could see exactly what it was that he was talking about. And this man put it in a perspective. It was very scientific, very logical, very clear, and it just helped to anchor what he already believed.
I love it. And I hope there will be a lot of people joining us because, information that is easily taken in becomes knowledge. And then we get to share and express that into the world. And,
Exactly.
I'm already so excited to take that course. I wish it was tomorrow.
February 25th. Well, we've got about 50 seconds left.
One last statement from you. What would you like to share with everybody?
Really just be you. Find yourself, fall in love with yourself, and let yourself live from your own internal knowing, that divine essence of you, because you are created unique and special. There are no mistakes in the universe. God created you perfect, whole, and complete. Live from your greatness, from your genius, and the world will be a better place.
Thank you, Reverend Barbara. You are a wonderful human being, and I adore you. And keep on keeping on.
Thank you, C. I love you. I appreciate this, and it's been fun to do this with you. So
Yeah, it's been
thank
great.
you. Thank you.
Take good care now.
Bye, everybody. Be back
Bye.
next week for more Spirit Cafe, and be sure to like and subscribe and share. Bye for now.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.